Always sounds so official. Um, so today I have Jody Murphy. She is with Charlottesville City Schools as their foster care liaison. Um, and she also has some other hats she wears there with social emotional learning and mental wellness specialist. So she can help us figure out that education piece, the rights they have, how do they get those credits for graduation? And then we also have Wendy Smith, who's here with us from Blue Ridge Community College. She is really central to them really navigating that new college experience. They might be the first person in their family to go to college, and there's so many things to figure out along the way. So she's here to help us with that piece for our older youth. And then we also have Jason Brown from Fostering Acadia. And some of you may have seen him. I've had him kind of talk a few times for us. I feel like Fostering Acadia does way more than just, become a place for older youth to live. They really get youth. So he is the founder and CEO of Fostering Acadia, and he's going to help us navigate what is that first step into their own apartment? What does it look like to be taking on those responsibilities as a young adult for the first time? Um, and that is them in a very brief nutshell. So I will give them a chance to say a little bit more about them and their roles, and just kind of big picture. What are the things about their program or role that we should know? And I guess we'll just kind of go down the line, Jody, Wendy, Jason, and go from there.
Hi, good afternoon. I am Jody Murphy. I am the mental wellness coordinator for Charlottesville City Schools. And I feel very lucky to be the foster care liaison. It is something that's really close to my heart. I have experience working for Charlottesville DSS as part of my past experience. And so when I talked to Leah about doing this panel, I did say, and when she shared, like, can you talk about your program? And I said, so, foster care liaisoning isn't really a program, it's a mandate, it's law. I take it very seriously. It's part of upholding a protection that kids have who are in foster care. And so for one of the things that I really want people to know when I talk about being the foster care liaison and understanding what our kids have rights for is that it comes out of the Fostering Connections Act of 2008 and the Every Student Succeeds Act of 2015. And what you most often will hear is ESSA. That's what people refer to. And it gives kids who are in foster care the protection and what we're hoping to ensure is educational stability. And really what I would say that I want people to walk away with understanding is that kids who are in foster care have the right for what's called a best interest determination meeting. There are some situations where one is not required, but kids have the right to remain in their what's called their school of origin. And my role as the foster care liaison for Charlottesville City Schools is to be the person for our school division who sort of receives that initial information, whether a student is coming to us or a student may be placed outside of our school division who is currently a student with us, and help get that meeting going and talk about what's in the student's best interest, not what's in the school's best interest, not what's in the administrator's best interest, not what's in the person who might need to transport or be responsible for transporting, what's in the student's best interest for maintaining their educational stability. As CASA volunteers, I'm sure that you have seen kids move way more than what we would want. And so every time their placement moves, if they are forced to move their schools, we know that it impacts their ability to graduate. And so this is the law, and sometimes right or wrong, this is being recorded, right? Like I am pretty aggressive when I go to my schools and say, yeah, we don't get to say that this kid can't stay. I'm sorry that they might be harder to serve. Sorry that they might be challenging, but they have the right to stay. Let's talk about what we need to do to make it work. For me, that's really the big takeaway. And again, we're not a program. That's what we have to do. Like Leah said, I wear a lot of hats. This is probably it takes up more time than one might think, just because we end up having more kids who end up being in foster care some years than others. And I am passionate about doing what's right for kids. And so there are times, and I will tell all of you, you are welcome to call me. I will help navigate problems or struggles that you are experiencing, whether it's with my school division or another, but I want kids to be in school where it makes sense for them receiving their education. And so that's what I would sort of say is what my role is and how I can help. And there is a foster care liaison for every school division. There is a list. I will send Leah some information to send out to you. You can access it on the DOE website. There's also an educational stability liaison for every DSS across the state, and we are supposed to partner together. And sometimes those relationships are great. I have a good relationship with our local city DSS, and sometimes school divisions struggle, if we're just being real about it. So I think that pretty much covers what my role is. And later, if there's questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jody. So I'm going to stop real quick before introducing Wendy to speak and just give Margaret Hoffer. She is one of our speakers. I want to give her kind of the lay of the lands as we get going here too. So I am having each one of our panelists talk a little bit more about yourself and your role. What is the key information that volunteers should know about you and your program? And so Wendy's up, and then Jason, and then Margaret, you can jump in on your part. So.
Hi, everybody. Like Leah said, I'm Wendy Smith, and I work at Blue Ridge Community College in our Great Expectations program. So the Virginia Community College system has a program called Great Expectations, and it currently is at all 23 community colleges. And it's basically a program that provides a coach or a coordinator for students that have been in foster care. So some of the most important things I would say just key is that we work with students who are currently in care, in fostering futures or different things like that. We work with youth who were in care. So if they were in care when they were young, but they then maybe went back to home or were adopted through care. So kind of three reasons. Funding and supports and things like that can be different depending on their age. And I'll touch on that a little bit more in a minute. But the key is that we try the best that we can to help any youth, any student who has been touched or affected by foster care at some point in their journey. And we provide, again, that coaching for them to help navigate them through that process. So a lot of times students may not know what a FAFSA application is for federal financial aid, or how do you get enrolled in classes? What is the process kind of to navigate? And so it's really helpful to have a coach just kind of be there with students to walk them through that. For myself personally, I always say in a former life, because I've been in higher education now for about 10 years, but I was a therapeutic or treatment foster care worker through DePaul Community Resources in Harrisonburg. So I did that for about 5 years as well. So I have experience working with foster youth in that way as well. And I think that just has helped me just understand a little bit more about the journey of what students are coming through and coming with as they come to college. The fact that they are even transitioning to us is amazing. One of the reasons our program was developed is just the need for that. The high number of foster youth that end up incarcerated or homeless, or all the challenges that we know about youth that are in foster care. And so that is the reason that this program was established back in 2008. And so, yeah, there's great data that shows that this program has been very successful in helping students navigate the process, graduate with an associate's, or complete a certification program. So we have some students who do welding or other, certification programs as well, and some that go on and transfer, finish a bachelor's degree and continue on. So that's sort of the main, I would say, points of the program.
Yeah, and Jason, you can go ahead and jump in too. Thank you.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. How you doing? Good. So like I said, my name is Jason Brown. My wife and I created Fostering Acadia back in 2017. My wife and I, we were foster parents and we worked in the foster care field. So we did both. Not only that, but we only fostered older youth in the foster care system. So over a span of 8 years, we ended up fostering 5 older teenagers, and then we had 3 biological kids. My initiation into parenthood was I was 26, my wife was 22, and we fostered our first 15-year-old son. Welcome to being a parent, you know what I mean? And so we just loved it. You know, we loved being foster parents. We just knew there was no way for us to foster every single kid in the state of Virginia. I'm sure Jody would have loved us to do that, but we were like, how can we make the biggest impact to this population? And so we decided to create an independent living program here in Richmond, Virginia. And so we started off in 2017, just opening up our doors. And now in 2024 are one of the largest programs in the state of Virginia. We currently have 75 youth in our program here in Richmond, and we're actually getting ready to launch a Tidewater campus in July of this year. So we're really excited about that. For those of you that don't know what an independent living arrangement is when a youth in the foster care system turns 18 years old, they have the opportunity to sign into Fostering Futures, which is what Wendy was talking about a little bit a minute ago. And it's the extension of foster care services until the age of 21. Now, here's the thing. Fostering Futures created a standard of compliance, which is 80 hours of school, work, or a combination of both per month. But Fostering Futures never created a standard of completion. It does not exist. And so if I went over to Wendy and I was like, hey, how do I get my degree in my bachelor's degree in English? And she's like, I don't know, just come hang out with us for 4 years, take a bunch of classes, and maybe you'll have your degree. That's not how it works. When I go to Wendy, she's going to tell me exactly what I need to do, what classes I need to take in order to get my degree. But that doesn't exist in the foster care system. And so when youth go to IL programs, they often don't have a blueprint, a roadmap, or a direction for them to complete Fostering Futures. So what we did at Fostering Acadia is we came up with 8 goals that all of our youth work on while they're here, and then we call that our standard of completion. Those 8 goals, real quickly, I can write them down in the group chat later if you guys need them. All of our youth are going to have a high school diploma or a GED. They're going to have a savings account of $1,000 or more. They're going to have a credit score of 650 or higher. They're going to have employment of $15 an hour or higher. They're going to have safe and affordable housing identified by 21. They're going to have their original vital records, birth certificate, social security card, insurance card. They're going to have some kind of permanency or natural support in their life. And then lastly, they're going to have their driver's license and a car. And Fostering Acadia has unique opportunities for each one of those 8 goals while a youth is in our program, because we're big believers that it's not programs that change people, but it's relationships and opportunities. And so that's what Fostering Acadia is all about, is relationships and opportunities. And so we can get into that more if you guys have questions about that. But let me end by saying this. I'm so excited to be part of this panel. CASA people are some of my favorite people, because you guys can advocate in a way that some of us can't. And you guys can say things that some of us can't as a private provider. And so thank you so much for always speaking up for these youth and being there for them in a way sometimes we can't. So I appreciate you guys.
And Margaret, if you want to tell us a little bit more about your role in your program.
Yeah. So my name is Margaret, obviously. I work for a nonprofit called Project Belong. And our mission vision is to recruit, resource, and equip the faith community to engage with the need in the community, specifically around foster care, adoption, and at-risk biological families. So that being said, we have 3 pathways that we focus on, and one is creating care communities for foster families, adoptive families, and at-risk bio families or reunified bio families, either way. Our second pathway is social workers. We have a program called Social Stars that is a one-on-one match between a supporter and a social worker, where that social worker gets messages, Starbucks cards, things like that, without any expectation of reciprocation, because we know how busy they are. And then our third pathway is our aged out youth. And that is what I do. And that is the only program that we run, because typically we connect the church or the faith community to the need in the community or to the people doing the work. However, there is no one in this region specifically working with youth who have aged out. So we had to bring in a program. And what Don't Go Alone does is we train, we call them adult supporters because mentor feels a little too clinical to us. So we train adult supporters to be a lifelong connection and support system for youth who are aging out or who have aged out of foster care. So we work with youth who are 17 and up. And we get to know them really well. We currently, we work Winchester all the way down to Richmond. And so we're at the top half of Virginia currently, potentially going down south at some point, but right now we're on that whole top portion. And then, so we get to know our young adults really well. And we get to find out what an adult supporter looks like to them and what they want that role to be. And then we do trauma-informed training for our adult supporters, as well as background checks and references, of course. And then we actually provide ongoing support and training for that adult supporter while they're connected to that youth. So we do initial training, but the bulk of the support and training comes as they're walking with that youth, because we know that every single young adult is different and has different needs. And so we're really tailoring the support that we're giving the mentor or the adult supporter to fit the needs of that particular youth. And the young adult actually gets to pick who their adult supporter is, because we know that foster care, unfortunately, often takes away choice. And so our program focuses on voice and choice and giving that back to the youth that we serve. And then we also we're a connector. So we work with a whole bunch, like probably 100 nonprofits and churches in the region. We work with 150 churches and around 100 nonprofits. That way, when our youth has a need that's outside of what we do, which is relationship, we're able to directly connect them, not just to a list of resources with phone numbers, but an actual person with an actual name who we've called and have physically connected them to, because that is what our young adults really need. A lot of times they just get a list of resources for housing or whatever it is, and we connect them to a face with a name. And so the adult supporter looks very different depending on the youth. It can be someone that helps them apply for college, helps them navigate the workforce, or it can be that person that sends them the first text on their birthday, or just calls to say how you're doing. Or one of my youth called her mentor the other day after she broke up with her boyfriend. The things that an aunt or an uncle or an extended family would do that our youth don't have, that is the role that our adult supporters play in the life of our youth. And like I said, any young adult 17 and up can be referred to that program if they want it. And you just send me their name, their contact information. We take them to lunch and we explain our program to them. So we want to make sure that they really understand what we do, so that they have the choice in that. So you're not signing them up for our program, you're signing them up for lunch. And then they get to decide once they meet our intake coordinator. Her name is Faith. She's amazing. She has lived experience in the foster care system. And she does an amazing job of connecting with our youth. So I also, like Jason, I am a foster parent. I've actually adopted 8 kids, 5 of whom aged out of the system, and we did adult adoption with them. So a little bit of lived experience, but CASA are my favorite. Our CASA for our, we have biological siblings that we adopted, and our CASA was a lifesaver. She was absolutely amazing. But I did want to share one CASA story. I was working with a youth. He's 19 and he likes to keep us on our toes. I'm sure you've all had youth like that you've worked with. He really likes to help us learn how to do our job really well. But he was signing into an independent living program up here in the northern region, and he had to list his family. And he's a youth, he's from El Salvador. And so any connection he has he does not have any healthy family connections. And under family, he wrote the name of his CASA worker. And it was like so cool. And I took a picture and I sent it to the CASA worker. So I just, shout out to you guys, because I think a lot of our youth view you in that way, and it's pretty cool. So that's what we do, and that's my spiel.
Thank you for all sharing, a little bit more about just, tip of the iceberg, what your program and who you are for our foster youth. So the next question is, or topic, I guess, what are common areas where youth face obstacles, and how do you or your staff help support them with those challenges and barriers? And same order, I guess.
Okay,
Yeah.
think I'm up. So I would say, especially for our older youth, I think the biggest obstacles as we have students or kiddos coming in is that they tend to be credit deficient is what we mostly experience. That is the biggest obstacle, right? And we have kids who they want to graduate high school. I rarely experience a student, I hear lots of things like they don't care about school. Right. That's not the case. School may be hard. They may not have had great school experiences, but when you talk to the kids one-on-one, they want to graduate. The hard part is they haven't potentially been anywhere long enough to get credits. And one of the hard parts is we can't, you have to have certain credits. You have to pass SOLs. If I could make things be different, we would get lots of kids high school diplomas, right? And figure it out. But there are state requirements that we cannot maneuver around. And I'm good, but I'm not that good. So that's probably one of our biggest obstacles for our older kids. And that I think Margaret shared, right? Our kids in foster care have feel a real loss around choice and control. And so I think another obstacle is that sometimes we have kids come in, we're not really sure how long they're going to be with us. Sometimes there's a real push to dictate what their path will be, right? They're 17 and a half. They have no credits. And people want to say, you just have to get your GED. And that kid was not ready to shift to GED yet. Logically, is that what makes sense? Probably, but they're not ready. And so, those are probably two of our biggest obstacles with kids who are coming in. I think, lack of records, lack of consistent education, not knowing how long they're going to be with us, trying to piecemeal together, like, what was your placement before, right? Like kids really, and I really come from a place of kids are being transparent about what they know. Like kids will tell me like, my placement, I had a kid a few weeks ago, my placement was in the gym. Like that was what they said their school placement was. I have no reason to believe that kiddo was not telling me the truth. I think that's where their previous school had them placed because they weren't sure what to do with that kid. I know he's not earning credits sitting in a gym. That doesn't mean I can say like, yeah, so you can't come here, right? So those are the obstacles that we are really facing. I think another obstacle we face is that when kids are in fostering futures, I experience there are lots of school divisions who want to say you're not actually in foster care, and so you're not allowed to come into school. You must get your GED. And I want to say very clearly, that's not true. Kids absolutely are allowed to go to traditional comprehensive schools. And that for me is heartbreaking when I have found out that kids have been forced to go GED because they are over 18 and they are so close to graduating and get forced into GED. School divisions cannot do that. And I would say that's a pretty significant barrier for our older kids. I think how we support them at Charlottesville, how our staff here supports them, is trying to be as transparent as we can about what's realistic, right? So like, if you want to get your high school diploma, I have to be real with you. It's going to take 3 years. So that's going to mean you're 20. Is that something you feel like you can commit to? And sometimes kids will look at you and say, yes. All right, let's talk about what your schedule is going to look like. Those are conversations with our school counselors. I know enough to be dangerous in that area. So I'm very honest about like, I'm not your girl for planning your schedule, but let's talk about what that may look like. being honest about all the options for kids and that they have choice and control about what that may look like within the parameters of what we can actually provide. Another way we really work to support is tracking down every bit of transcript and record that we can get from every placement or other school that they have been to, and trying to put together every possible credit that we can for kids. It is amazing when you start to put like, oh, look, they did pass Health 9. Like they don't need to take that again, but it was buried 5 schools ago and nobody had it. That makes a kid will look at you and say, you did that? You found that? Yep, we got it. Our registrar, I asked our registrar and she requested records from 12 places. You actually only need 9 credits to graduate, not 17. So I think that's a huge way. And the other biggest, or not the biggest, but one of the major ways we help is we are very lucky to have a lot of significant mental health support in Charlottesville City Schools. And I think we don't assume that every student in foster care may need it, but if they do, we try to be proactive versus waiting for things to happen. We know kids are worried that they may not be wanted. They know that they tend to be looked at as transient, like, oh, you're only going to be here for a few weeks. So, you're at the group home, so it doesn't really matter. We try to connect them with somebody pretty immediately. We don't wait for things to go south before we say like, hey, we care about you. What do you need? And if you don't know, it's okay. Let's try and figure it out. So we try and be as proactive as we possibly can. And I'm aware that our school division probably has more resources than other school divisions. But we try to do those things on the front end versus waiting for something bad to happen.
Thank you. We appreciate that. The proactive part is huge. Yeah. And Wendy, if you want to share your take on things.
Sure. So I would say that, one of the biggest challenges is with the transition. And so, like I mentioned earlier, every community college in Virginia has a Great Expectations coach or Great Expectations coordinator. They might have a different title. And so while we're just one person, we do work strongly with our other departments at our college. So I can speak about at Blue Ridge Community College specifically. We have a career coach program that's within all of our high schools that are in our service region. And the career coach at each of those high schools is so helpful to help with the transition from any youth that's in any of those high schools. They typically connect with me early and let me know, okay, I'm working with a student that is in foster care. And that way I can connect and kind of get them in the Great Expectations program, explain the program to them, and then also help with some of the funding. So I would say financial, of course, is going to be another really big challenge for our students. So if students have been adopted, or if they were in foster care before age 13, but not after age 13. So let's say they were adopted at age 5, or they were in care for a period of time, but went back home. They are going to be viewed as a dependent student in terms of their FAFSA. And so that makes things a little bit trickier for youth that have been in foster care after age 13. So if you were adopted after age 13, or if you were in care after age 13 at any point, then you're viewed as an independent student. And then their FAFSA is based solely on their income. So that would be the difference of having to put parental tax info in your FAFSA application as a dependent student versus having to put just your own income. So here, and I would say really at all of the community colleges, students that are in care, in fostering futures, or have been adopted after age 13, or in care at some point after age 13, they're going to get the full Pell Grant and really have the most access to the most funding to help them support, their college journey. So we do have some other funding that we can help students tap into. We have private donors, and so we have a Great Expectations scholarship that we award a student. We do also sometimes get private grants and things, even from the Virginia Community College Foundation. So every community college has an educational foundation that raises money, but then the Virginia Community College system in Richmond also has an educational foundation, and they raise money as well. So like, for example, for all of my Great Expectations youth, I was able to provide them all with a laptop when COVID happened, so that they could continue their classes online and make sure that that was a seamless transition. And that was provided through a private donor that gave a grant for that. So there's really a lot of really good resources. We do have an emergency fund grant as well. So sometimes I'm able to help students with gas cards or grocery cards. We can sometimes help with, rent or emergency things that come up depending on the situation. We can kind of try to tap into different funds. But so we really do try to help students with their financial challenges, because that's one of the biggest that we see is just, as they're kind of transitioning from high school to college, they're also transitioning to maybe an independent living program or to some other type of, so they have a lot of transitions at that stage. And so we really try to be there to support them in sort of all those ways that we can.
Thanks, Wendy. And Jason, you're up again.
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I wanted to, as an independent living program, there's a lot of different areas our youth struggle with, employment, education, housing. But I wanted to pick one that I thought that the CASA workers could really have a call to action on, and that would be transparency. Actually, Jody touched a lot on it a little bit. I was kind of clapping in the background when she was talking. Our field is not transparent enough. We just aren't. We have to remember, and I know it's hard sometimes, but we have to remember what it was like when we were their ages. And sometimes we just forget. And a lot of times what happens is when we get a youth that comes to our program, they're 18 years old and they are so far behind their peers not in the foster care system. A typical youth that we get in our independent living program when we get a referral is a youth that doesn't have an ID or a learner's permit or a driver's license. If we get an ID, that's like we struck gold around here. We're like, someone got us an ID. They don't have a high school diploma. They don't know what the word resume is. Maybe they've had a little bit of job experience. They don't have, a lot of natural supports in their life or family in their life. There's not any good records in regards to their birth certificate and social security card. Those are often lost. And so that's what a typical youth looks like when they come to Foster Acadia. And we have 3 years to get them in front of their peers that are not in foster care, because Fostering Futures ends at 21. And if we were all to get transparent, like honest in the field, the question I always ask people is how many of us were ready to be completely on our own at 21? No help at all, nothing. I see Jane laughing down there. Some of you probably have had adult children. How many of your adult children are ready to be on their own without your help at 21? And sometimes when I go to guest speak at places, I'll ask the people that I'm speaking to, how many of you all had a high school diploma by 21 or by 18? How many of you guys had a driver's license in a car? How many of you guys had experience working, working at all? They raise your hand. All these hands go up, and then I'll ask those people, how many of you all ready to be on your own at 21? And even those people weren't ready. And so like we keep data, and that's something that unfortunately we don't do really well in the foster care field, is keep data. It doesn't really exist. And Fostering Futures is coming up on its 10-year anniversary soon, and there's no data that's being kept about it. And so that's wild to think that we're coming up on a decade and there's no data. And so, the question that I have is, if our youth have to be ready at 21, where do they go? What happens? I needed help past 21 and I had to rely on my parents or my in-laws. And so they don't have that. And so if they don't have that, what happens to them? And so we just have to be more transparent in the field. We need to talk about what's working, what's not working, and stop doing the same thing that we think is working and it's not producing any outcomes or results. We need to be able to define what success looks like for these youth, because we're not doing that, so that they know, what kind of goal to achieve or go after. And then we really need to be honest with ourselves and ask the question, what happens after 21? When funding ends, when all the support ends, what happens? And if we can't answer that question, we're not going to be able to help our youth. One of the data points that we've been keeping as an organization is we've been polling social workers, CASA workers, POs, CSA coordinators. 67% of the population that works with our youth, like you guys, were not ready to be on their own at 21. 67. Now think about our youth, and they didn't have a lot of the supports that we had growing up. And so we've got to, as a field, as a community, as a population, come up with ways to support them, be more transparent, talk to them about how we can honestly and effectively get to the goals that they can achieve. And one things that CASA workers can do that a lot of people can't is bring up the awareness in a way that some of us can't. Spread, be an advocate for the youth in a way that some of us can't, and let people know, hey, there's a real problem out there, that these youth need support, probably past 21. Right now, there's a bill that's sitting in front of the General Assembly to extend fostering futures to the age of 23. It probably won't pass because, again, no one's keeping any data. So why would it pass if no one's keeping any data and they don't have a reason to increase the money if they don't know what's going on? And so we've got to start collecting data. We've got to start understanding how to support these youth and maybe extend fostering futures to 23, so that we can get them closer to their, brains being fully developed and be able to choose careers that they want to be in, and help them out in the way they need to be helped out.
Yes, all very true, and appreciate you saying that. Yeah, we talk about it here quite a bit about 21 not being enough. Yeah.
I just add one thing in, I'm sorry, for what Jason said, which is completely true. And I see it so much working with that age at Blue Ridge. There is a little program that can help bridge the gap up to age 26. Education and training vouchers. It's up to $5,000. I'll put the link for that in the chat box. Of course, it's not going to, assist necessarily with near as much, but students can basically tap into, they have to, this link, if you click on it, it talks about the expenses that can be covered, the application eligibility, things like that. But it is something that we try to help our students tap into that might be at that age 21, getting ready to have to leave their independent living placement or what have you, and may help tap into to even buy a car or do things like that. You can be creative. You do have to sort of push a little bit with DSS to tap into some of these funds, but that is just something to consider.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. And before I forget, and then I'll have Margaret talk, there is also the they made some funding available for housing, but it's been super hard for each area to access it. I think there's maybe 2 regions in the whole state who've been able to access those funds, Charlottesville being one of them, which we are super thrilled and connected our youth with. But if everyone can kind of find ways to get those funds, we can help our youth longer with housing, which is really unaffordable. So something else to keep in mind.
That's called the FYI vouchers for those of
Yes.
you guys.
Yep. Thank you. Yeah, I don't always say all the acronyms and the things I forget you aren't in the loop on. And Margaret, you're up. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, so I was actually going to talk about that. So I had 2 areas that I think our youth, they struggle with multiple, but 2 I was going to talk about, and one is definitely housing. I just read an updated statistic yesterday that 60% of youth do not know where they're going to sleep the night of their 21st birthday, which is pretty alarming. And just to go back to Jason, statistics tell us that 97% of youth that age out of foster care will be back in the system, either incarcerated, in drug rehab, in trafficked, in one of those systems. 71% of young men will be incarcerated, and 60% of kids currently in foster care in Virginia have parents who were in foster care. So it's a perpetuating cycle. So that being said, I'm going to talk actually specifically about housing. It is, if you talk to almost anyone in the foster care system, including the young adults themselves, that's their number one concern. And so we do have the FYI voucher. And there are, to my knowledge, 15 counties currently that have accessed it. And a lot of them are up north. And we are actually acting as a case management organization for that, which is why counties were not accessing it. So the FYI, sorry, I just used a lot of jargon. The FYI voucher is a HUD voucher, but it's specifically for youth aging out of foster care. So it's 3 years of housing that any youth with any foster care experience, they don't have to have aged out, can access. So if you have a young adult, and they can access that starting at 18, most don't, because they can't double dip into the foster care, fostering futures funding and the HUD funding. There are a few youth, for example, if they were adopted, things didn't work out, they're not accessing fostering future funds, and they have an 18-year-old in that situation, they can access the FYI voucher. And they can access it up until their 24th, sometimes 25th, depending on how the county reads the legislation, birthday. And again, it's a 3-year voucher, and it lasts for 3 years from the point that they access it. So if you have any questions or any young adults that you think that would be applicable to, we do have the ability to refer youth for the FYI voucher. And the Department of Social Services actually has a task force assigned to making sure that every single county is able to access that voucher. But if there are youth in a county that aren't accessing it, we've been able to creatively work with the counties that are accessing it, to allow every youth to access that voucher that's in our program, that qualifies. So that was the first kind of big need that our youth have. Fortunately, the FYI voucher is helping us get them to at least 24, 25, when they could potentially actually have a living wage job that would help them afford Northern Virginia housing prices. But I think the other need that I see youth aging out of foster care have is the knowledge that they're amazing. And I think foster care just takes that away from our kids. You know, most of our kids who've aged out have been in 10, 12, my daughter was in 15 different placements. And that really takes away your self-worth. And I was on the metro the other day, and I was watching this 2-year-old, 3-year-old with their family, and it was like a whole bunch of relatives. And the 2-year-old had put a lid back on the water bottle, and it was like monumental. It was like they had, you know, just solved world hunger. Like everyone was clapping, there was cheering on the train, everyone else on the train got involved. And it occurred to me that that is something that is so typical in so many of our lives, where we were adored even for the simple things we did, and our kids have not always had that experience, and foster care, you know, took away from that knowledge that they are worthy, known, and adored. And so I think that, you know, why we advocate so hard for them to have not a mentor or relationship, somebody that is there to remind them that they're awesome, period. And I think that is something that foster kids significantly lack. And I think it makes all the other barriers far more insurmountable if you don't even have the core knowledge that you're worthy and amazing.
Thanks, Margaret. Yeah, you make me want to cry, but that's, yeah, we all want to build that up in them, because I think everybody here thinks that our youth are amazing. But yeah, getting them to feel that too is really important. So we have, it kind of leads into the next one pretty well, I think, because I think we can all do our little piece to make our youth feel valued and special and celebrate all the little wins along the way. But how can CASA volunteers help support our youth transition into this adulthood? And it's not just a one-day thing or a simple solution, but how how do you think our volunteers can support them? And we'll start through the line again, I guess.
So I would say, especially for pre-high, moving into post-high, right? The best thing that CASA volunteers can do is advocate for what kids need to be able to move forward with whatever the kids' goals may be after they leave high school. Not be afraid to ask questions. Prior to me, I've been in K-12 or pre-K-12 for over 10 years. And I remember when I first came in, I'd been used to working in like the social work world. Everybody talked the same language. I understood what everybody was saying. I came into schools and I was like, I'm not sure I have any clue what in the educational world, what people are saying. And I say that because sometimes I think we do it on purpose. So people will just not ask questions. They'll be quiet. We are the experts. Like, I have expertise. I do not have expertise on the student who is sitting in front of me the first time that I've met them. They're the experts on themselves. People who know them have far more expertise. You know them. Their biological parents may know them far better if they're still involved, right? Their DSS worker, right? All these people and schools, and I work for a school and I'm here for lots of reasons, but we are very quick to discount. Yeah, thanks for letting us know, but we're going to make the decision. I would say ask as many questions as you have and don't stop until you get the answers that you are satisfied with. It's okay if you feel like you might be annoying somebody. Like, I'm famous for it. It's fine. Communicate until you get what you need to get the kids what they need. Reach out directly to the schools. And I would say, and again, I'm on that front entry. But I certainly have people following up with me because I get hey, we thought this was going to happen and it hasn't. My response is always like, hey, thanks for letting me know. Let me see how I can help. For me, that's code for, why what I was expecting did not happen, which means Jody Murphy goes and finds out directly from the people who I was expecting to do what we need to do, did not do it. I will give everybody the benefit of the doubt. But if I don't know that it didn't happen, then there's no way for me to help that student get what they need. I would just say, don't be afraid to advocate for what your kiddo needs and is right for them. I always ask the question, if that was my child, would I be okay with what's happening? And if the answer is ever no, I am 100% okay with being perceived as difficult. It does not bother me at all. 1 second, I will sleep well at night knowing that I did what I thought I needed to do so kids get their needs met. And I just say that because education, we move at a slow pace, whether we like to believe that we do or don't. And I just say change is hard in education, even when we're being proactive, even when we are trying to do what's right. For every kid you are advocating for, right, there are 100 other kids that somebody might be calling about as well. So it's with good intention that we are moving, but there's other things. So a reminder, but please don't ever give up. Just keep coming to get what your kids need so they can do all of the good things that they have in them in the future. Because I always say, I'm just planting a seed. I may never see that kid again, but I'm always hopeful that their future is bright. And to what all the other panelists have said, right? Like, I just believe that every kid is going to go out there and be the best version of themselves. Doesn't matter what is in front of me at that very moment. I want to be transparent and real about what we can do.
Thank you. And Wendy.
In addition to what Jody said, because that's so important, the advocacy part there. I would say, and this is kind of building on what Margaret said earlier, but just be a cheerleader, be that safe place, for students. And I find in my role here at the college that is really what most of my students tap into the most. Is they'll check in with me when things aren't going well, but they'll check in with me when things have gone well, and we celebrate that. And I think that helps to build that confidence in themselves and helps give them a safe place to really, because they are learning so much about who they are and who they want to be as kind of they navigate this time, this age that they're in, and this kind of whole process. And so I think continuing to just have people surround them that are that for them, that are safe places that they can go to express whatever it is, the highs, the lows, the ups, the downs, the things, and then get that encouragement that they can do it, that they can continue, or to get that positive, celebratory feedback of, look what you did. That's awesome. We talk all the time with my students. I talk about know your why. And I help my students learn what is their why? Why are they doing, why are they here taking classes at Blue Ridge? What do they see for their future? So just being that, for your youth, just helping them kind of know their why, tapping into that support along the way, the encouragement, and then celebrating as they go through it.
Thank you. Jason, yeah, you can jump in.
Yeah, I would say ask the questions that others are afraid to ask or don't want to ask. And what I mean by that are, unfortunately, I would say that there are some localities, not all. There are some localities that, if you peel back the curtain behind the foster care world, some of the youth don't get the information that they need. And that's where CASA people come into play. You can give them the information that they deserve to know about. In some localities, youth don't even know about independent living. In some localities, they don't know about fostering futures. In some localities, they don't know of the opportunities that could be afforded to them through the ETV, through the FYI, through all these different types of things. Now, I am happy to say that a majority of localities are sharing this information with their youth, and that's great. But sometimes these youth don't know about these programs and this access to these supports. And that's where I think you guys come into play. And put the politics aside, all the youth deserve the opportunity, no matter what locality they're in, to have these access to these opportunities. And so I really would encourage you guys to continue asking the questions, finding out what supports are out there, like you guys are doing today, for these youth, so they can access them and give them the opportunity to achieve the goals that they want to achieve through the help of these different organizations and opportunities.
Thank you. Very true. And Margaret, if you want to share your view on what we can do.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of, I agree with everything. I think do what you're doing. I mean, the youth that we work with rave about their CASA workers. I think you guys are making amazing differences that you probably have no clue. That sometimes it feels like the things you're doing aren't mattering, but they do. They very, very much do. I had a kid who he wants to be vegetarian, and the program he was living in, for whatever reason, was not honoring that. And his CASA worker picked him up for whatever, and specifically went out of his way to take him to Kava because he knew that it would fit his dietary needs. And he still talks about that, and it happened like a year and a half ago. So what you're doing matters. But I think also just knowing that the human relational aspect is so important and necessary for our youth. We had a 20-year-old, we're an active foster home. Fortunately, we foster in Loudoun. I love them. Unfortunately, they don't have CASA, which makes me super sad. But we had a 20-year-old placed in our care, and he needed to schedule a doctor's appointment. So I left for work. I wrote the phone number, and he hadn't done it when I got home. And I asked him about it, and he had never done that before. He had never called a doctor and scheduled an appointment. And so he needed me, and he knew the basics of how to do it, but he needed me to sit there with him in the kitchen while he called. And I think sometimes our youth are perceived as lazy or defiant or whatever. But a lot of the time is they just simply need that human relational aspect. They need someone to look at the list of 50 resources and find one and go visit it in person. And I think that is a role that CASA often does play, and continue to do that, because we assume sometimes that our youth know how to do things or have the confidence to do things that they, in fact, you don't know things you weren't taught. My 24-year-old son asked me once how to mail a letter. You don't know what you're not taught. And I think that's what CASA can do. And again, I'm a huge CASA fan.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I think what everybody said, it just rings so true. And I hope, the volunteers that are here and those who might watch the video later, just remember even the little things matter a lot to these youth. Being that cheerleader, being that person who shows up every month, who checks in on them, who says happy birthday, it's really important. So I know we have 2 minutes until we officially are supposed to be wrapping up. Are there any questions that people have? No, I didn't leave too much time here. Jane, were you trying to ask a
I'm
question?
trying to unmute. I have a question, and I don't know who this is applicable for, but I'm wondering, a lot of these kids, the problem at home is addiction and substance abuse. And I know that tends to be generational. How often does that just totally derail these best laid plans? You said ask the hard questions.
Yeah,
I'm
that is a
asking
hard question.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we see, often in our program is that when a youth comes in and they've had addictions themselves or their family has had addictions, is really, again, going back to that transparency stage, and trying to get some buy-in or rapport with the youth where they feel open enough and honest enough to share with you what they're struggling with. And that's the first part of it. Because if they don't feel open and honest to even share with you what's going on, you're not going to make any traction at all. And so rather than coming at them from like a belittling standpoint, it's coming at them from a loving standpoint, a humanistic standpoint, putting that human element back into human services and just loving on them and meeting them where they're at, and then starting that journey with them to help them, get to a healthier place, both themselves or their family. And that's where it's got to start. With older youth, this is the bottom of the ninth inning and there's 2 strikes, 3 balls. This is it. Like there's no more help after this. And so we got to do whatever we can as a village to support them and meet them where they're at and just love on them in a way that no one has done so far.
And I don't know any statistics, and I, don't always know what happens to every single one of the youth that has come through CASA. But I will say the youth I've worked with, even if they've had substance use at home or in their past, I think they've done really well. And they, if people believe in them and are there to help connect them with supports, and like Jason said, the human aspect, we're there rooting for them. I think that does go a really long way.
I would also add, and I agree with both what Jason and Leah said. I think at this moment in time, it's not the substance use, like we're in an epidemic for youth around mental health and substance use, and that we really, to Jason's point, need to be looking at substance use not as a standalone, like they're using because they're hurting, and it's a much larger issue than just and I don't say just, but like they're using to address a much larger issue. And until we start really looking at the why and what they're hurting and addressing both their substance use and what's really going on about why they're using, we're it's like just blowing in the wind a little bit. And so to Jason's point, being transparent with kids and offering them choices and looking at how they want to address what's going on with them, and not sort of the older model of like, you just have to stop because I'm telling you. What we have seen is we know that doesn't work. For any of us who have worked with anybody, that's gone. Court ordering anybody to not use, like all of those old methods that didn't work then definitely aren't working now. And so I think really working with kids around like, is this working for you? And where do you want to be and how can we help you get there? And that's hard. It's hard work, especially when substances get involved.
Thank you.
I appreciate all of your time, volunteers and speakers. We all care about our older youth, and every kid in foster care. So just keep doing all the little pieces that you each do. And, we are part of the village. So thanks for all you do. And if you have any questions after this, or you want to be in touch, please reach out. I'm happy to talk more. So thanks to you all. Have a good rest of your hopefully sunny Monday.
Thank you.
You all.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.